keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it. So explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it. No scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool. Hear my heartbeat beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones. Bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the AntiMedia Radio. Once again with your host, Nick Bernabe, here on UCY.tv. Thank you all for tuning in and welcome back to the show. Glad to be back with you. Hope everyone enjoyed their weekend as I did. We got a great show in store for you tonight. We had all kinds of news over the weekend and so many breaking stories, so many things going on. And so we're going to try to get through all of that stuff tonight. We're also going to have a couple of special guests on the show tonight from antiwar.com. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show, but hopefully we can get into some geopolitics and some foreign policy and things like that. Anyway, without further ado, let me introduce our co-host tonight, Jake Anderson. How you doing tonight, bro?
I'm good, Nick. Still reeling a bit from some of the news over the weekend, particularly the bombing of the hospital that I'm sure we're going to get into, and also the inching closer to the ratification of the TPP, which we'll also get into. But on a personal level, I'm doing well.
That's always good to hear. It's always nice to be able to, keep it positive even in these crazy times with all these horrible things going on. But, that's why we have this show. So hopefully we can spread this information and hopefully improve the situation for people that are suffering at the hands of, the oligarchy, whatever you want to call it, the control system, the deep state, as we talked about last week, whatever you want to call it. The first obligation we have is to spread this information so people know what's going on, and then once people have the information, they can act on it. At least that's what we hope for. Our other co-host tonight, DB Schwartz. How you doing tonight, DB?
Doing great, Nick, except for, like Jake said, what's going down with this insane group of morons that run things, and I guess they don't care about their own families the way they're passing shit.
Yeah, they probably have their families in some space pods, circling, orbiting the Earth at this point.
We'll still find them.
I mean, that's what it seems like, man. These guys really act like they're insulated from any of this stuff that's going to happen. These idiot politicians like John McCain inching us closer to World War III. Obama and his support. The funny thing is his Republican supporters in Congress that are really trying to jam this TPP thing down our throats. So let's go into this TPP issue. And I know both DB and Jake have some insight on this, as well as Manny. Manny's on the line as well. Manny's got some insight into the TPP, and we can probably draw some similarities between the TPP and what went on with NAFTA, because it's a very similar trade policy, except TPP is a lot bigger. So Jake, you want to start us off here with the TPP?
Yeah, sure. One of the great ironies is that we find this blue moon bipartisanship only when it seems to apply to things that screw over the masses. You know, when it comes to war, suddenly Congress and suddenly the Democrats and the Republicans hold hands and jump off the cliff together. And then when we see TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, suddenly they have bipartisanship there. And it's so sad to me how we just can't quite seem to break through to the masses how big of a deal TPP is. And I have a lot to say about it. I mean, people have been talking about it all day. You know, it's going to represent 40% of the GDP.
That's the world's GDP, right?
World's GDP. That's how much it's going to affect. And it's. I'm going to wait to get into some of the intellectual property aspects of it for when I talk about the digital rights management article, because there's huge ramifications for intellectual property rights. This is just a buffet of liberties that the TPP is carving off here. Maybe DB, maybe you can, or Manny, maybe you guys can give a little bit better of a summary of exactly how the TPP is going to start affecting us on a daily basis in the near future. Yeah,
DB, what do you think, man?
Well, right off the bat, what it's going to do is force internet providers to start cataloging your literal entire history by your ISP. So if you don't have an offshore VPN like I don't, I mean, it's time to get one, even if you have to pay for it. And you have to be real careful about it. And if anybody wants to call in and kind of give suggestions how to get around that aspect of it, because really what it's going to do is it's going to make anything you do that's against the state in any way or against corporatism in any way cataloged and thrown into a file. And then when they get around to it, you'll get a letter in the mail saying you need to come to court because some huge corporation is going to sue little old you for whatever damages they think. And this, again, Nick, we talked about this probably 2 years ago. Debtor prisons are coming back, and this is all wrapped into it, and it's all a big global scheme to create a huge slave workforce. If you're not already a person that's going to lose their job because you couldn't get through college, I mean, I alluded to it in a few posts I made today. The blue-collar jobs, they're pretty much already gutted, and now this is the final death knell for them in the U.S.
Yeah, one interesting caveat here is that I was listening to the announcement this morning as I was waking up. One of my coworkers here in the office was playing it, and I was pleasantly awoken by the TPP announcement by the trade ministers or whatever you want to call these guys. That's what they're calling themselves. And it was very Orwellian the way they were talking, because they were just sitting there like, oh, we're gonna, this agreement is gonna bring us high-paying jobs. It's gonna, advance our economies. It's gonna bring equality to everybody. But I mean, it simply couldn't be any further from the truth, because I'm sure Manny can attest to this. NAFTA did pretty much the exact opposite for all the parties involved, except for these very, very large multinational corporations that made a killing off of this. I mean, we see how inequality has drastically gone up since NAFTA was passed. I mean, it's exponential, and so we could probably expect the same thing from the TPP. What do you think about that, Manny?
Well, I don't see the TPP being any different than NAFTA. NAFTA, basically, we keep on saying that NAFTA was for the rich, and the same thing is going to happen again. It's part two, basically, as far as we're concerned. We talk about it lately with the Latino community, and it's like the sequel. We call it the sequel to NAFTA. I mean, how else can we really define this and stuff like that, And, we already have people practically working for nothing, bringing out produce, bringing out this and stuff like that, and then to become even more slaves because of this, that's what really affects me, and just I'm not happy with it.
Well, so a couple things. A couple things to add. One of the more disturbing aspects is the environmental side of it. I think is probably what disturbs me the most, which is that. Essentially, and I know people have varying degrees of opinion about regulations in regard to the environment, but one thing we definitely don't want is decisions with regard to the environment being outsourced to a corporate tribunal, an international corporate tribunal, and that's essentially what's going to happen. I find that very disturbing. And a couple other things is DB, you were alluding to the criminal effect, the criminalizing of citizens with TPP, and without any hyperbole here, quite honestly, you could go to prison for file sharing. They can seize your property, asset forfeiture. These are all things that are going to be very real. The TPP is going to have the effect of essentially repressing free speech, because it's going to have a chilling effect on speech. And I did some research on the Electronic Frontier Foundation site today, and they're very much at the forefront of battling TPP, and they straight up say this is going to have an effect on speech. It's going to stifle innovation. It's going to suppress security research, such as encryption research, and it's going to restrict the control and use of devices with respect to patent laws. And I can get more into that in a little bit. DB, I think I jumped on you there for a minute.
No, I was going to just say it's got a chilling effect for anyone who's a student of history like myself, because similar effects, although not on the technological aspect, took place prior to the Great Depression. If you look back at history, pretty much starting roughly around 1500, so the last 500 years or so, every 100 years there's this great calamity, great economic collapse, and then a great war to follow. So we have it all set up for the exact same dominoes to fall. What people may or may not understand, though, is that this war will be the last war, and we'll have to start all over again. It's that serious. So, and that's whoever survives, and that's going to be a small percentage. So I hate to be like the bearer of doom like I usually am, but this is how it works. I mean, you have a reaction and a solution to a problem that they've created, which is this giant Ponzi scheme in the Western economy. It's all falling to the house of cards, and they're going to use Russia and China as the boogeymen to drop the ball.
Now, I just want to bring this back to the economy here, because the reason why I was saying this announcement was so Orwellian is because these trade ministers were, really talking up this job stuff. It's going to build our economy. It's going to give us a bunch of high-paying jobs. Now, the interesting thing, I'm sure anyone that's been following the TPP relatively closely, there was a huge battle in Congress recently over the TPP, and one of the big developments that we witnessed was when the Democrats actually rebelled against Obama and said, "Look, we're not going to give you this bill unless you provide this other funding to do job training for all the people that are going to lose their jobs because of the TPP." You know what I'm saying? And so this is why this announcement is so Orwelling. They're coming out here and telling us, look, this is going to give us a bunch of jobs. Yet at the same time, the lawmakers are already preparing for all these job losses that we're going to experience. And so there's something in this bill that we don't know about that we're going to find out really soon, because according to the deal that Obama made with Congress, the text, first of all, after the agreement is made, it has to be a 90-day waiting period, and the full text must be made available to the public for 60 days. So this is a big development because, as you know, we haven't had the full access to the TPP. This has been one of the most secretive trade deals that's ever existed. I mean, congressmen are basically subpoenaed to not talk about this stuff. When they go into these rooms, into the negotiations, they're basically told that they can't bring their phones in. They can't talk about anything that they've heard. The only small tidbits we know about the TPP for sure have been leaked by WikiLeaks. That's all we really know. So, we're going to get 60 days of public access to this text, and we're going to get to find out what's really in it. We're going to get to find out why they've been so secretive all this time. And so we're going to have to look over this language with a really fine comb and really see what's actually going on here.
It's so it's just insane. It's in what alternate universe are these laws, these agreements that are going to affect the entire world being decided upon in secret rooms by people, without any input from the billions of people it's going to affect? It's mind-boggling. This government, they looted the present, they looted the economy and the present, but that wasn't enough for them. Now they want to loot the future too. And they want to take our broken laws and export them to the entire world now. Our broken intellectual property laws are now going to be exported to the rest of the world. It's really it's horrifying.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
some of the numbers too, Nick, are staggering. Looking at a 2014 report, it says only 134 million Americans out of 315 are working. And what the TPP has in it is basically a budget for 2016 to provide unemployment for 99 months for 30 to 40 million additional people. That's what they expect the TPP to do.
It's like House of Cards. I hate to make a pop culture reference here, but in House of Cards, Kevin Spacey's character cuts entitlements, which is essentially a conservative idea, but he's a Democratic president. He cuts entitlements in order to create something called America Works, which is a federal program to give every single American a job. It's frighteningly close to that. They're essentially going to create, probably federal jobs that aren't actually going to grow the economy. It's a house of cards.
Yeah, man, it really is. It's dangerous. And, keep in mind the language here that is being used to describe these officials that are negotiating this deal. They're calling them trade ministers, but in actuality, what we're talking about here is corporate lobbyists. And we're Obama and the rest of Congress that allowed the fast track, the quote unquote fast track bill to be passed, have basically delegated all of their responsibilities to represent, everyday Americans over to corporate lobbyists to negotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we can't help but question, the conflict of interest here that we're dealing with. So it's going to be really interesting to look over this text. It should be out in about a month, and we're going to get 2 months to go over the text and really see what it says. As I mentioned, all we know about it is very few details because all we know came from WikiLeaks, 2 leaks, and that's it. So we'll find out about that. We're going to have to move on here because we're on a tight schedule. Jake, I want to go to you to talk about your story today on the DMCA.
Yeah, it actually interconnects with the TPP because the TPP is essentially my article is about the digital rights management and more specifically the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, which was put together in 1998. And when I was at Burning Man, I saw a presentation by Cory Doctorow, who is a science fiction author, but more importantly, he's an information rights activist. And he's rejoined with the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which I had mentioned before. And ostensibly, his presentation is about the Internet of Things, which is kind of an abstract concept still at this point. But it has to do with how objects are going to be kind of interconnected digitally with the Internet. And what Cory Doctorow wants is he wants to end patent laws that forbid jailbreaking, basically. And jailbreaking is when you essentially break into the source code of a object, let's say a coffee maker, and you make it better, or you change it. And what Cory Doctorow and the EFF want are to basically take down Section 1201 of the DMCA, which it makes it a felony to remove a digital lock on an object. Doctorow goes so far as to call the enforcement of this deadly. Now remember, this was a law that initially was basically to protect Hollywood from piracy. It has since kind of metamorphosized into a way to restrict anyone from what's the word for it? Jailbreaking, basically. And it's called the inkjet printer model. And Dr. O believes it represents the worst of technology, which is that we have this covenant right now where customers are the product and patent holders, such as your mobile carrier, they kind of leverage these aftermarket consumables that prohibit the use of third-party parts. This includes even John Deere, which, if you own a tractor, a John Deere tractor, it is illegal for you to go into the circuit board of that tractor and make your tractor run better. It's complex, but it's a form of it's basically a form of control over consumers and citizens. And since we live in this increasingly computerized space, it's increasingly relevant that we are able to, have control over the have control over the spaces in which we live. Now, the problem. Okay, so the problem with regard to digital rights management and patent law litigation, the reason why it's been so difficult to stop this is that the government only chooses cases. There's a few cases in which companies have tried to bring legal actions, it's called anti-circumvention provisions, and it's virtually impossible because the government knows that they have this house of cards here, which they are now exporting to around the world under the TPP. So it's going to be even harder. What Doctorow wants to do is find impact litigation and try and strike some structural blows to the DMCA. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this? I mean, a lot of people say, well, so what? If someone has a copyright over something, why should you be able to? If someone has a patent over something, why should you have the right to go in and change it? I mean, what do you guys think about this kind of intellectual property rights?
Well, it's a very interesting concept, I think, because in the internet age, the question of intellectual property has really been it's become a gray area, and so I've received a DMCA takedown claim a couple times. One for an image from Getty Images, another time from a lady that said we excerpted too much of her article, and I mean sometimes this stuff is sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's people that are just trying to shut down the conversation. And I think that's what's really scary is you can have these corporations that own a huge amount of the media and a huge amount of the intellectual property in the world, almost to a point of near monopoly, and they could use that to shut down a lot of dissent. They could use that to shut down information that's spreading. There was a guy that was literally thrown in jail for hyperlinking to leaked documents before, and so this really it really is a gray area. But I think that it's being used in a way that is not in the public interest.
Absolutely.
It's a war on whistleblowers, is what it is. It's just under the guise of commercial protectionism. And the truth is, like, with the economy kind of ramping down now and with so many consumers globally, all you have to do is put out a quality product at the right price. And what's happening instead is you have corporate monopolies jacking the price up, not really paying the artists anyway, paying all the bureaucrats, the millions and millions and millions of bureaucrats in between and lobbyists. And that's what it really is all about.
Right. Doctorow, he calls it deadly, and I was actually kind of surprised to hear him use such a word like that, because he's a pretty measured person. But this is why he says so. The DMCA makes it a felony to disclose information about defects, errors, and vulnerabilities in systems that have software locks. So he says, if there's a bug in a system that you rely on, let's say a heart defibrillator, it's against the law to tell you about that bug, because if you know about that bug, you might be able to jailbreak the system. So this is legislation that is punishing, like you said, whistleblowers, but whistleblower is a stigmatized word. Let's say what it really is. This is a war against people who want to reveal flaws in the system, and this it taps right into Snowden. What Snowden's trying to do, it taps right into Chelsea Manning. I mean, this is a war against information and truth. I mean, it's and I think and this last thing I'll say about how TPP connects with this is that these new laws under TPP, we're going to see retroactive copyright laws, a 20-year extension on copyright laws, which the EFF calls a complete misappropriation of the public domain. This is actually going to be kind of like the TPP is going to be the DMCA on steroids. What we're going to see is extreme criminal liabilities for jailbreaking. For example, any kind of circumventing, which for encryption research purposes, or any kind of work that's being done to make programs interoperable across different platforms. That's now a felony. give credit to Chile, Canada, New Zealand, and Peru. These are countries that are actively fighting against some of the language of what the TPP is doing in regards to the DMCA. And, just one final note, I think it's important to note that in 2007, Dick Cheney made it so that his defibrillator was wireless. Now, why did he do that? Because he knew that in this age, hackers might try and hack into his heart and assassinate him. Now, most doctors don't let you do that. And essentially, these new laws are going to make it to where if you were to hack in, let's say you had a defibrillator and it wasn't working, you hack into your own heart and make your heart work better. You go to prison. You go to prison for making your heart work better. That works as an allegory for me, but it also works on a very literal level in which that they do not want us correcting their effed up system. And this is a war. This is a war on information.
Yeah, man, it really is. And so this guy, Cory Doctorow, has laid out a 10-year plan to bring down the DMCA. Yes. And it's all included in your article. Anyone interested in reading up on this can go over to the AntiMedia.org and learn more about it. If you think you may have a case that they can use to help file a lawsuit against the DMCA, the information is there for you to go and email Cory at the EFF.org, and you could get in touch with him, and maybe you can be a part of the solution in bringing down this, monopolistic ideology that's permeating right now on the internet. But now we're going to shift into a little bit of foreign policy stuff. We have a couple awesome people with us tonight, joining us for the show from antiwar.com. We have Angela Keaton, the director of operations, and Scott Horton from the editorial staff. How are you guys doing?
Fine, thanks.
Good.
Awesome. Well,
Hi.
We're glad to have you on the show. And I guess first off, Angela, if you can just tell our audience a little bit about antiwar.com and what you guys do over there.
Oh, well, we're a website that functions basically every day as both a news aggregator, and we dive pretty deeply into the editorial content. We say what our editorial position is right on the URL, antiwar.com. But our news is mostly strictly facts. I mean, we're just looking at this is what U.S. foreign policy does, and these are the consequences. And it doesn't seem like it should be that complicated. And even if it were that complicated, how complicated should it be to convince people it's probably not good to kill children with bombs?
Yeah, exactly. And so many people, I tend to refer to what the U.S. has become as an empire, because the way I see it, we may not be an empire in the traditional sense where we're occupying vast swaths of land and forcing conscripts out of the local peoples, but we do have more or less an economic empire, economic imperialist policy that we use, and it's fairly evident in Iraq and, of course, now in Syria, Afghanistan, and all these other countries that we have operations going on. In fact, there's at least 8 countries that we're actively bombing right now. I wanted to get your insight on that because I get a lot of pushback from people, and they're like, "Oh, we're not an empire; we're a republic. There's a big difference." What do you think of the overall policy that we're dealing with here in the U.S.? Like, what kind of a system are we dealing with?
Well, first I would dispute that we're not a traditional empire. I mean, depending on whose numbers you quote, we have somewhere between 700 and 1,000 bases around the world. I'd hardly think that's it's hardly inconspicuous. It's certainly an empire. I think Scott, though, might have something to say about both those questions. I'm just kind of stunned that I don't know what people are responding to when they say we're a republic. I mean, they might as well be saying we're an elephant or we're a chair. I mean, yes, the United States. It's incontrovertible facts we're talking about here. So I'm not entirely certain. I would need to know more about who it is you're arguing with.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because a lot of people, I guess, they don't realize the facts of the situation because they watch a lot of TV and we all know about Operation Iraqi Freedom, and it was sold to us as this operation to go liberate people and bring them democracy, and I guess a lot of people still believe that. A lot of people believe that we are fighting the good fight out there, but as you mentioned, I think the facts maybe don't line up exactly with what we're being told. So since we have Scott on the line, I kind of wanted to talk about this trending story that's going on right now with this hospital that was bombed in Afghanistan, because this is just a horrendous occurrence, and there's people throwing around war crime charges and things like that. And for those that aren't aware, over the weekend, a U.S. airstrike hit a hospital in Afghanistan operated by Médecins Sans Frontières, which is basically the French affiliate of Doctors Without Borders, which is an awesome charity. They go around to all these countries and help people out, whether it's from Ebola or whether we're talking about conflict zones and things like that. Now, according to the charity, they've actively been communicating with all parties involved in Afghanistan about the whereabouts of their hospital. So everybody knew the coordinates, everybody knew the location of where this hospital was at, yet it was still bombed. In fact, once the initial bomb started dropping, MSF claims that they alerted the authorities, including the U.S., that they were being bombed, and the bombing continued for 30 minutes. Scott, are you familiar with the story?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as much as anybody, anyway, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows exactly why they bombed the hospital or what was going on. Certainly, they should have known. I thought immediately of the poor Branch Davidians trying to call 911 and reaching the local sheriff's department trying to call off the ATF raid, and no such luck. If you ever read Catch-22, you get the idea how all the calls to all the right people still don't make a lick of difference in the middle of a firefight, and it could be something as sinister as they thought there was one Taliban guy in there that they wanted to get, or somebody screwed up on the information and said something was happening that wasn't happening, or who knows what. It was funny though. Today I listened to NPR News because know your enemy, and they were interviewing the government spokesman, and he was spinning so hard, but he didn't really, only because he got no traction, and he's just sputtering that, sometimes it can be legitimate to bomb a hospital because, it just depends on what degree of success that you're going to get out of it compared to the acceptable amount of collateral damage. And even the NPR reporter, I don't think he was just playing devil's advocate. I think even the NPR reporter was going, come on, man, they bombed it for an hour. It sure sounds deliberate, doesn't it? And, I don't think anybody knows yet, but my assumption, I guess, would be that they mistakenly thought there was a high-value target in there, and they decided that whoever else had to die, they don't care. And that's their job. I mean, the best spin that you could put on it is America, 14 years in, still has failed to win the Afghan war, and so is doing airstrikes on in the middle of populated cities, because, that's the position that they're in. They have no men on the ground, and their enemy is taking territory. I mean, the Taliban had just sacked Kunduz. That's why they were bombing.
Yeah, and the thing that really made me kind of mad about this story is that this, the official story kept changing. The first report was like, there was terrorists in the area, we bombed the area, but we may have accidentally, some of the hospital may have been damaged, and that was the initial story. And then later on, it's like, the hospital was accidentally targeted and it was directly hit. And, now they're blaming it on the Afghani government, saying that the Afghan government provided bad intel or bad coordinates for the strikes. But there was a great article by Glenn Greenwald on The Intercept the other day, and it was titled, Somehow Bombs Keep Falling on Countries That Obama Claims to Have Ended the Wars In. Can I maybe get your take on, the overall situation in Afghanistan? We've been out there for about 14 years now. They told us that we won the war and that, the place is way better, and now that it's a democracy and, that it's just a great place or whatever. Obama says that he ended it, but obviously, the Taliban retook the city of Kunduz last week. That's where this fighting was happening. That's where the hospital was bombed. What do you think's happening there in Afghanistan? Did we spend 14 years wasting our time and our resources and thousands of dead, and who knows how many Afghans have been dead, or are they actually making any progress over there?
Yes, it's all wasted. Every bit of it is in vain. you know, I don't know how old you are or how well you remember the beginning of the war, but on September the 10th, Osama bin Laden's men suicide bombed the leader of the Northern Alliance opposition, and his name was Massoud, and he's the guy who's supposedly the Mujahideen leader in Rambo 3. But what's funny is he was actually KGB all along, and was, you know, really not fighting against the Russians, but was taking American money to pretend to, but was a double agent. But anyway, Osama's guys killed him on September the 10th because they knew what would be coming in terms of the retribution for the September 11th attack. And that was it. He was the only thing that was holding the Northern Alliance together, and they were as good as dead anyway. The Taliban had them completely cornered, and they were on the eve of their defeat at the time that the Americans then intervened and put these guys in power. And they were basically the communists and the warlords and the butchers that the people of Afghanistan had accepted the Taliban to get rid of. And, you know, there had been a civil war going on ever since the fall of the communists and the withdrawal of the Soviets. And the guys who are America's sock puppet ministers in there right now, like General Dostum, these are the guys who, and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, these are guys who skin their opponents alive, who, you know, engage in mass rapes and mass murders. You may have heard of the Afghan massacre of 2001, when they rounded up all these Taliban at Mazar-e Sharif and put them in, you know, basically like the back of 18-wheeler containers, and then just machine gunned them all by the thousands, a couple of thousand, 1 or 2,000, I guess, 1,500, 2,000, machine gunned to death, either drowned in the blood of the others or suffocated or died from the gunshot wounds and that. This guy's the vice president right now under the American sock puppet government. Hamid Karzai, that America had put in power and kept in power for, 12 years there, was a good-for-nothing junkie. And, you know, even with all the support in the world, couldn't have achieved the fool's errand of building some kind of Western European nation state, some liberal democracy in the heart of Afghanistan, which is only, of course, you know, the stated goal. I mean, the real interests at play here, when you asked about whether we're an empire or not, yeah, I mean, it's not a traditional empire in a sense that, I mean, yes, we have bases all over the world. We have complete economic and political and military dominance on every continent on the planet. There's no question about that, but you're right that we don't, you know, quite do it the British style where we just enslave all the Indians and make them grow grain for us and then steal it or whatever, you know, in that kind of sense. But what we have is a national security state. We have, you know, not just the military-industrial complex, which everybody always thinks of the corrupt corporations bribing our, you know, benevolent government into doing these things. But, you know, the generals and the CIA mercs and all the different interests inside and outside the state, they have an interest in just keeping the thing going. As David Petraeus said, adding time to the Washington clock. So they talk a bunch of nonsense about we're going to give them a government in a box. That's a real quote. We're going to change their entire society and give them a government in a box, and the surge will work, just chant it enough. But what really happens is we just extended the war for another 8 years, another, you know, umpteen $1 billion and whatever, directly into the pockets of the corrupt private interests and into the power of those inside the state. And so, you know, just like with the rest of this, the more they lose in Afghanistan, the more they get to stay till at least 2024.
Yeah, and that's a really scary prospect because the amount of resources that are involved and just the chaos that's ensuing. You know, one thing I can really tell from what's going on over there is that the people in Afghanistan don't take much of a liking to the U.S.-backed government. You know, it comes off as just really inorganic. It comes off as just a puppet government. And I think the people, that's why these towns fall to the Taliban. They fall back to the Taliban because it just seems like the government isn't representing anybody, and that's basically the same thing going on in Iraq as well. You got a government out there representing U.S. interests and not representing its people, and therefore it doesn't have very much organic support. And of course, Afghanistan is another one of those places that's extremely resource rich. We covered recently on the AntiMedia study that showed that countries that were resource rich were about 100 times more likely to have foreign intervention in an internal conflict. Many times it's over oil. Some of the assets in Afghanistan include rare minerals, lithium, and of course, I don't want to get too far into the conspiracy realms here, but opium, which is something that the Taliban had almost gotten rid of, now in 2014 has reached peak levels, record levels, in fact. So, I don't want to speculate on that, but that's just a side effect of what's been going on over there. Now, I want to ask you, Scott, one more question here, and then I have another question for Angela. But first off, I want to ask you, I wrote an article over the weekend regarding this airstrike on the hospital. But, the problem is that just a day before this airstrike took place, Obama was literally on TV condemning Russia for civilian casualties because they started dropping airstrikes in Syria. Now, of course, Russia claims that they're bombing ISIS and bombing terrorists. And, the definition that Russia is using for terrorists is pretty broad. I think it's basically anyone that's against the Assad government they're willing to bomb. And, that's kind of a given because Russia and Assad are really, really close allies. So that kind of makes sense that they're going to be over there bombing to keep Assad in power. But I wanted to get your take on this kind of hypocrisy here, because we got Obama on one hand the day before this airstrike saying, look, we can't let Russia go into these countries and create, civilian casualties. Meanwhile, the U.S. drone strikes that have been going on for the last decade have taken huge amounts of casualties. In fact, there was a recent paper that came out, I believe it first came out on Medium.com, that claims that there's been as many as 4 million Muslims that are now dead because of the war on terror. So, what do you make of this hypocrisy? And of course, from what I can tell, the media is pretty much more, the Western media, the establishment media is kind of complicit here. They don't really cover when the U.S. does these horrible things. But as soon as Russia drops a bomb, it's like the world is ending and, we got to put a stop to this. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's sort of like you said earlier where, hey, people watch TV. And they still believe the narrative that we went to Iraq to help the people there? How could that be? Because the facts aren't what count. It's just the narrative that counts. So same thing with Obama's UN speech, where he got up there and he says, this is terrible thing breaking out where countries are acting like might equals right when we settled this already after World War II, that we have a rule of law and all this stuff. And the whole place, the peanut gallery is just staring at him like, what, are you kidding me? But it's for the domestic TV audience where they just can continue with this myth that, hey, America's only just here to help, and even if somebody got hurt, then oops, sorry, but we're only still here to help. And so they can say with a straight face, oh, yeah, Russia, they say they're fighting terrorism, but we know what they're doing. They have interests in the Middle East, and they're working on those, as though these kinds of things don't apply to us at all. This is purely an American accusation against evil actors in the world, that they have interests and are pursuing them, unlike what we ever do, which is always completely selfless. Now, I reject the 4 million, and I saw that too, and, maybe I'm really missing something, but I've been watching real close, and I think we're at probably 1 point low digit something million in Iraq dead, and that's excess deaths. That's not killed in the wars, but that's adding up all the excess deaths, the excess death rate, the higher death rate during the war to before the war, and comparing how many people had died. And I think it's plausible that it was around 1 million by the end of 2008, but it's been much lower level warfare and there until 2014. So, lots of refugees, 5 million, maybe 10 or 12 million refugees now from Iraq and Syria. I don't know, all the totals. But when it comes to the numbers of dead, I can't imagine it's anywhere near 4 million. Now, if you want to throw in all the Vietnamese and Koreans and all that, now we're talking more like Holocaust figures, 6 or 10. But, and everybody the American government slaughtered since World War II, you're talking, way up there. But just in the Middle East in the last 10, 15 years, still, it's not like 1 million is a small number. It's only when a number that I think is that far out, like 4 million, is thrown around that it sounds like it is. But no, we're talking about, of course, absolute devastation. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, you can fool some of the people all the time, and those are the ones you want to concentrate on. And so that's the way they do it. And the Republican and the Democratic administrations is just focus on what the Americans think. And they have no idea. In fact, they did a poll. How many Iraqis do you think have died in the war? And people were answering like, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, when it was more like, no, 500,000. Men, women, children dying, being exploded to death, being shot to death, dying of cholera, and Americans completely oblivious watching sitcoms. So, I think that's what the hypocrisy is about, is just about sending the messages to the Americans that we must continue on this way. That's all.
I think just wanted to quickly interject, though, that the death tolls are not ending because of the use of depleted uranium. I mean, you're talking about 40,000 Hiroshima's worth of radioactive material in Iraq alone.
Well, the depleted uranium in Iraq is a serious problem. I wouldn't downplay it, but I don't know about those kind of numbers being attributable to it, though. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to put a real number down on the atrocities out there. As you said, I saw another estimate which came about a month prior to the 4 million, which estimated around 1 million. It's really hard to say. But another area of interest that we want to get into real quick, and I wanted to ask Angela first off on Syria. Because I saw the Ben Swan video that you're in called "The Origins of ISIS," and you guys were talking about where ISIS really came from, and what gave them this breeding ground to thrive. And you had some really interesting comments in that video, and I'm sure most of the people listening in tonight saw it. It went extremely viral. I think it's up well over 1 million views by now, actually. So, Angela, I wanted to ask you, just in general, I mean, why is ISIS all of a sudden this huge problem? Where'd they come from? I mean, many people have said that it's our own policies that have led to giving them the vacuum to fill. What do you think?
Oh God, it was a year ago when I thought a certain way, and I don't think I necessarily think that way now. So I'm going to pass this one to Scott.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I'll try to keep it quick so you can ask Angela something else, because I want to hear her say stuff. But yes, no, it's 100% George W. Bush's fault and 100% Barack Obama's fault. Bush turned all of eastern Iraq from Baghdad all the way down to Kuwait into Shiistan, and all of western Iraq into Zarqawi land, basically, into Al-Qaeda in Iraqistan. And in 2011, when the Arab Spring broke out, Barack Obama took the side of the Mujahideen in Libya and in Syria, mostly because that's what Israel wanted and what Saudi wanted and what Turkey wanted. And so they financed the Mujahideen, ran a bunch of guns and mercs and money into Syria, and they've been supporting America's enemies against Israel's enemies ever since then, since 2011. And in 2014, it culminated in the actual declaration of a caliphate by the Islamic State in Iraq group, turned that from a name of a group into a name of an actual place. And all because this serves the interests of America's allies. It doesn't serve the interests of the United States of America at all, other than, again, back to those vested interests inside CIA and state and DOD and, their cronies that just need a make-work program. Like you guys were talking about earlier in the show, government make-work programs. Really bad for the economy. Really bad for lots of things. And I don't think that, the CIA and the Saudis actually control the Islamic State or anything like that. But, boy, they sure keep funneling guns and money straight into their side of the war. And when you listen to the government's conspiracy theories, worthy of Richard Pearl and them blaming Saddam for 9/11 back in 2002, they claim that Assad is behind ISIS. Why? Because he doesn't attack them all the time. Well, but that's because it's Nusra that's actually attacking him. ISIS is more concerned with holding the territory that Nusra already conquered. And so, whenever they come into conflict, ISIS guys get shot and exploded, and Syrian soldiers end up with their heads cut off. So it doesn't sound like much of a cooperative relationship to me. But then again, Al-Qaeda knocked our towers down, and our government doesn't seem to mind whatsoever, doesn't seem to mind the Israelis giving them medical treatment, the Turks giving them, and Saudis giving them millions of dollars. So, yes, absolutely, George Bush and Barack Obama are as guilty as Baghdadi is for his existence and for everything he does.
I definitely agree with you, man, because, I don't think that ISIS would be in existence right now had it not been for the fact that we overthrew Saddam Hussein, and, now we know that was on faulty information. I don't want to say that they were just strictly lying to us about it, but that's pretty much what it seems like.
Nick, even Donald Trump agrees with that now.
Yeah, I mean, straight out of course.
They were definitely lying. There's no question that they were lying.
And so this kind
maybe that's a different interview. In fact, go listen to my last interview with Tom Woods, and that'll cover the lightest in the war part for you.
Awesome, man. Definitely. So there was another article here I want to bring up, and this is on Mint Press News, and the title of it is Migrant Crisis and Syria War Fueled by Competing Gas Pipelines. And it's a pretty interesting geopolitical article, very in-depth, but it basically shows that many of the Gulf states were trying to build a pipeline up through Iraq, through Syria, into Turkey, and then into Europe. We all know that Russia is basically supplies a large percentage of European oil and natural gas and those types of things. And, of course, we know that the U.S. and Russia are at odds geopolitically. So this article basically makes the assertion that much of what's going on in Syria as far as trying to get Assad out of the way, and I think Obama has made that pretty clear in the last few days that, ISIS is bad, but, really what we want to do is get rid of Assad, and, we got to wonder why that's happening. I know that they give us this cop-out that it's for humanitarian reasons, but I think we can kind of debunk that with all the information we know and looking at our historical moves all around the Middle East. It tends to be more about resources, oil, geopolitics. What do you think, Scott, is like the larger geopolitical implications here? Do you think it has anything to do with oil and pipelines, or do you think it's something else?
Yeah, I read that, and I think that must be part of it, where there's basically the axis of oil could be Saudi through Sunni Iraq, through basically eastern Sunni Syria, and into Turkey. Or it could be from Iran through Shia Iraq, and then somehow, I guess, I don't know exactly what their plan was, to get through Iraqi Sunnistan to then reach Shiite-controlled Syria. But so obviously the second plan there is off. I mean, there's no way they could do that now. The Shiite pipeline is certainly canceled with the existence of the Islamic State now. I don't know whether the Sunnis can go ahead through. And I'm sure that must have something to do with why the Saudis and the Turks have been so interested in regime change here. For the Israelis, I will advise you to, for their role in this, which is huge, I'll advise you to read Dan Sanchez. I will always recommend you read Jason Ditz at news.antiwar.com all day, every day. He's the best on everything, always. But there's this great article coming out late tonight. Actually here in just a few minutes. And we'll be running tomorrow. It's Dan Sanchez, our newest writer at antiwar.com, our newest regular columnist. And he's a Mises Institute guy as well. And he's got this great article coming out about David Wurmser. And you guys may have heard of the neoconservative paper, A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm, that David Wurmser, Douglas Feith, and Richard Pearl, and a few other neocons wrote for Benjamin Netanyahu back in 1996. Well, there's a companion piece called Coping with Crumbling States that is also principally authored by David Wurmser and explains what the neocons thought was going to happen when they did all the horrible things that they did in the Middle East. And it'll blow your mind. And Dan Sanchez is brilliant, so he applies some really great analysis to it. So you'll definitely want to check that out tonight at antiwar.com.
Awesome. I'll definitely recommend Dan Sanchez to our audience. He's contributed 2 or 3 articles to us before, and he's one of the best writers I've ever seen. Make sure everyone's looking out for that over at antiwar.com. I got one last question for Angela before we let you guys go. What can we do about all this? I mean, it's a huge question, but what can we do to undermine this empire? Because I think mostly everyone listening tonight understands that it's a problem. They understand that we're being robbed of our resources to pay for these wars overseas, which for the most part are just contributing to inequality, contributing to corporate profiteering, and killing off a bunch of people. Angela, what do you think? Where can we start? What can we do about this?
It's pretty simple. We can start by finding our gonads everywhere and standing up to the very simple principle that it's just immoral to kill. I'm tired of having to make economic arguments about how much this costs. It costs all kinds of money. We can't even, our simple monkey brains can't even figure out how much money all this is going to cost. But we certainly know how many people, certainly know that the value of each and every life that's being killed and destroyed by this. And it's ridiculous to me that in 2015 I still have to go around convincing people that it's somehow morally wrong to do any of this. It's something that it speaks to something really hideous about our character. So the simple thing to do is to stop accepting it and calling and regularly confronting people about what it is they're saying and doing when they're talking about casually bombing an entire country. Especially when people were we know people are so casual about, bomb Iran if they have nukes, or let's do this, or their indifference to the plight of the Palestinians, or any number of situations that's brought about by the U.S. empire. It's pretty disgusting, and it's not civilized, and I don't know how at this point in time, if people haven't convinced themselves already, then what could possibly change their minds now? People always said there's some people are instinctively anti-war, that normal people want peace. Yet I never actually see any evidence of this beyond, very, very, I'd say spurious surveys about how people think about the matter. So it isn't a hard question at all. It's just, finding courage and being straightforward about the fact that this is wrong. That's it.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. And it's not really hard to comprehend. Killing is bad. I think everyone knows killing is bad. But I think one of the reasons here at the Anti-Media why we're so fiercely, combative with the corporate media is because they're so good at dehumanizing people, and just acting like everyone in the Middle East is some kind of terrorist. We see that right now with the reaction to the refugee crisis. I don't know if you see the threads on InfoWars or Fox News, anywhere. You look at the comment threads and it's like, kill the men, keep the women, or send them back to fight. Why are they such cowards running from their own country? I mean, people have been completely brainwashed, this dehumanization propaganda, I think. And that's one of the biggest problems. I think everyone knows that we shouldn't kill, but when we think that they're not human, or when they're so dehumanized that it just becomes less of a killing, because it doesn't seem like they're fully, they're not American, so it's not that bad, And it kind of, the hypocrisy came to light. I mean, every time there's a shooting, and don't get me wrong, these domestic shootings are horrible at the schools and all that stuff, but people freak out over that, and we know that people care about people dying. People don't want to see that. But, when Saudi Arabia drops a bomb on a Yemeni wedding, which they did last week, and killed over 100 people, and the U.S. is backing up that war in Yemen, nobody gave a shit, And so I think a lot of it has to do with the propaganda, the dehumanization. We're coming up to the end of the show now. Angela, if you could just quickly go over where people can find your work, how they can follow you, how they can get involved with anti-war.
It's just antiwar.com, and if anyone ever wants to ask me a question, and I'm usually less prickly in regular conversation than I would be on the air, it's just Angela at antiwar.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Scott. Thank you. Great conversation. We'd be glad to have you back on the air anytime you want to be back on. Otherwise, we'll contact you when we got some more big news on foreign policy. This weekend has just been enormous with the hypocrisy going on, and I think it's really always a responsibility of anyone that's aware of what's going on to really shed light on the hypocrisy. With that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, everyone that's been following us. Make sure you share the links, the antimedia.org, antiwar.com. Check them out. Sign up for their newsletter. Sign up for ours. Catch us Monday through Friday on the Anti-Media Radio. Peace out, everybody. Catch you Wednesday.
Buenas noches.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.